This episode of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine was made possible by contributions from slaves like you. Thank you very much.
Good morning, slaves, and welcome to another edition of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine, the show with the power of 50 fucking Jedis. I am your host, the Stimulator, and I know you are just dying to see some Ukrainian riot porn. Yep, people in Kiev have been fiercely battling the pigs in some of the most intense street fighting we've seen in a while. But many of the people in these videos are proto-nationalist wannabe fascists who would hate for the former Soviet colony to join the ranks of the collapsing white supremacist European Union.
We're not against the signing of an association agreement with the EU, which is something economic, but we are categorically against Ukraine joining the European Union. The bureaucratic monster of Brussels is imposing on the people rules that are anti-Christian and anti-nationalist.
This situation has me more conflicted than the shootout scene in Breaking Bad. You know, when DA fuckers were battling it out with Nazi bonehead crank dealers? Who do you fucking root for? To get a better understanding of the complex situation in the Ukraine, go to thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org for an insightful interview with Dennis, a Ukrainian anarchist who breaks it all down for you. While burning pig flesh in Kiev was generating enough CO2 to heat up 100 motherfucking taco trucks, Rockefeller-funded douche canoe and 350.org top pimp Bill McKibben, during one of his many symbolic anti-pipeline protests, was still wondering whether or not the man your mama calls Obama is playing hanky-panky with Exxon and BP.
Now we're going to find out whether John Kerry and Barack Obama are similarly captives of the oil industry, or whether they're willing to really stand up when it counts for the commitments they've made about climate change.
Well, I can answer that for you, Bill. Yo, Tape Ninja, you know what to fucking do.
I bring a message from your master.
I believe that we should continue to expand oil production in America.
Now, we're not going to stop drilling in the Gulf tomorrow, folks. Let's be realistic. There are 48,000 wells out there.
Slaves you were, and slaves you remain.
Meanwhile, in Michigan, 3 women who were actually stopping a tar sands pipeline were found guilty of monkey-wrenching the corporate death machine and face up to 3 years in prison. Vicky Hamlin, Lisa Leggio, and Barb Carter interrupted the construction of an Enbridge tar sands pipeline in Michigan last summer and were charged with trespassing, resisting, and obstructing a police officer.
Don't doubt for 1 second the ripple effect of what you do. You throw one little stone and it creates a ripple. Do not forget that.
Speaking of pipelines, our comrades at the Unistoten camp have issued an urgent statement calling on all allies to help stop the construction of the Pacific Trails pipeline, a ginormous metal tube that would bring frack gas from the so-called British Columbia gas basin to the Pacific Ocean. The communique reads,
"It's time for us Wet'suwet'en to hunker down and assemble all the allies and supporters and begin working at shutting down the present construction phase. All researchers and activists who have committed to helping us need to step up now and provide help where you can."
In case you didn't know, the Unistotens started building a blockade in their territory 4 years ago in anticipation of this very fucking project. So now the time for action has come.
We are Wet'suwet'en people, and the territories that they're talking about belong to our people. They don't belong to a tribal council, they don't belong to bands, they don't belong to industry, and they certainly don't belong to government. If anybody wants to try and force the pipeline through our territories, they're going to meet resistance.
While brave comrades battle industry in the wild, peeps in the shitty face the brutal oppression of the motherfucking police. In 2003, the pigs murdered over 300 people in the US alone. Many of these folks are blacks, Latinos, and street folks. Just last week, the Montreal Popo killed 41-year-old Alain Major, a mentally ill homeless man. And late last year in Durham, North Cackalack, 17-year-old Jesus Huerta was shot in the head while handcuffed in the back of a pigmobile. Even more disturbing is the case of Kelly Thomas, a schizophrenic man beaten to death by 3 cowardly coppers in the OC, and the whole thing was captured on video.
No, see my fist? Yeah, what about him? It's getting ready to fuck you up.
Oh, no!
When all 3 fucking cops were found not guilty, hundreds took to the streets to express their fury at the injustice. Peeps blocked intersections, chanted slogans, and kicked out the flatulent capitalist media. And finally, some good fucking news. 24-year-old anarchist Jerry Koch is out of jail after successfully resisting a grand jury. Jerry spent 8 fucking months in the clink for courageously refusing to cooperate in the investigation of the Times Square Army recruiting bombing of 2008. Here's Jerry last year before being sent to jail.
Has this all been worth it?
Yes. Easily, yes.
Act like you ain't know the NSA, you CIA been already tapping your phone and tagging emails, homie, wait. Bruce Lee when I'm moving on that stage behind that bass, screaming end the occupation of Palestine, homie, wait. I'm just winding up and getting started over here. The locals in every city see the changes every year. Watching Starbucks move in, streets getting repaid. The land of the home of the Timothy McVeigh's. Terrorists being made in little suburban cities. How they get this way? In Boston, the crock pot. Newtown, babies got shot. Some pootie in Colorado walked into movies like pop. And now they talking gun laws, but shitting over healthcare. And mental health is probably more to blame when it come to terror. And everywhere you look on television in America is violence all inflicted by a Navy aircraft carrier. Bang, bang. So what you expect from all its citizens? The beneficiaries of a missile killing children in countries that ain't our own. All while taking a loan. If I was China, I'd step in like, homie, pay what you owe.
For many people, the Occupy movement provided their first exposure to consensus decision-making, and General Assemblies became the main organizing mechanism for many of the park occupations in 2011. But assemblies are not just only for large-scale protest encampments, but also to organize in a more micro level, like in neighborhoods. As capitalism collapses all around us, people are going to need to adopt strong cultures of mutual aid so we can hook each other up and stop depending on the motherfucking state to do shit for us. But also assemblies are useful in organizing revolts, like the successful general strike in Barcelona in March of 2012. To learn more about neighborhood assemblies, I bring you Peter Gelderloos, author of Anarchy Works, and a longtime resident of Barcelona. Hey Peter, how the fuck are you?
Doing all right.
So, what the fuck are assemblies?
Assemblies are, especially when we're talking about social movements, when people get together to meet each other, to pool their resources, to share information, sometimes to make decisions or to coordinate their activities. Assemblies for a long time and in many different continents have been an integral part of social uprisings, rebellions, and diverse kind of struggles, as long as these struggles are not controlled by some kind of hierarchical organization, by a party, by some leadership figure.
And are assemblies intrinsically anarchist?
I don't think that assemblies are intrinsically anarchist because they can have lots of different forms and lots of different purposes, but assemblies will inevitably give rise to or play host to a tension between authoritarianism and centralization within a group and decentralization, freedom, or more anti-authoritarian, anarchic forms of organization. A lot of times we hear that that assemblies are really the essence of direct democracy, making decisions through assemblies. And in a sense that's true, but it would be just as true to say that assemblies are inherently anarchist. In my mind, there's a very strong contradiction between these two paths, or rather these two paths are divergent. Direct democracy believes in giving everyone the theoretical right to participate in decision making, but not practical access to decision making, because one thing that direct democracy has in common with all other forms of government is this insistence on unity and on centralization, that there can only be one assembly and that the decisions of this assembly are binding on all the participants, and that these decisions have a greater legitimacy because everyone theoretically was participating. So really the participatory aspect of direct democracy functions more to give legitimacy to its decisions so that those decisions can then be applied and imposed on everyone than it does to make sure that people are actually involved in the self-organization of their own lives.
Why do you like assemblies as a way to organize social struggles?
There's sort of a what they call a culture of assemblies here, that it's common. It's been a common part of social struggles throughout Catalonia to hold assemblies, whether it's in the workplace, in the neighborhood, or what have you. So it's not a tradition which we can easily identify the starting point of. But at least in this recent cycle of assemblies, the first neighborhood assemblies started in Barcelona in preparation for the general strike of September 2010, which was a general strike that was called for a variety of motives against the new austerity measures that were being passed in the Spanish state, and also as a part of and really coming out of social movements against capitalism, against the state, that have a fair amount of strength in Barcelona. In organizing, especially the general strike of March 29th, 2012, the neighborhood assemblies played a really important role. And that's in large part due to the position of the labor unions. In Spain, a general strike, for people to be able to participate in a strike and go off work, it needs to be declared by a labor union. But of course the labor unions in general are participating more with the bosses, more with the companies, or working on a level more with them than with the workers. Labor unions were really important in the selling out of popular struggles in the Spanish state, from the transition to dictatorship, from dictatorship to democracy. In my mind, the major unions wanted to call a strike that was born to fail. Or at the very best, in the best case scenario for them, they would have really large participation, but wouldn't get out of hand, wouldn't turn into riots, and would be just sort of a walk in the park. So they called that general strike with just 3 weeks advance notice, basically in a bid to not give time to these other groups and other people, these other spheres of the social movements, to organize for the strike, so that since they're the ones with all the resources, they would be the ones who would be able to define the strike. And in fact, they didn't even do any propaganda for the strike. They didn't put up posters for the strike and all that, at least not in Barcelona, until 1 or 2 days before the strike. The neighborhood assemblies, even though when we all found out what the day of the strike was, everyone threw themselves into it. They threw their shoulders to the wheel and really took on a tremendous effort to inform everyone in the neighborhood about the general strike. And of course this was going on in every neighborhood, to make their own propaganda, to make their own posters and flyers about the general strike, to talk about what a general strike really is. And so all of these very visible signs were created and disseminated throughout the city that the strike was happening, and that it was going to be big, and it was going to be rowdy. And this really served to create the psychological and the emotional atmosphere in which people could believe in that possibility, and those who were attracted by that possibility would come out in the streets and they would make it a reality. So in the streets that day, you didn't see a lot of the sort of social democrats and pacifists, largely sort of middle class people who had come out a lot in the 15th of May movement, but wanted a very tame reformist movement. Or if you did see them, it was in the protests of the two major unions. But you saw a lot of the people who hadn't come out in the 15th of May movement. So a lot of more marginalized people, a lot of youth from the neighborhoods, And those were the people who made the riot happen, who made it possible. But not them alone, because also there were just tens of thousands of people around those who were directly participating in the riots, giving them support, not backing down, not running away, and therefore making it impossible for the police to encircle them. And a lot of them even were applauding, were cheering when these people were throwing rocks at the police or defending themselves from police projectiles or setting things on fire. The neighborhood assemblies in all these different neighborhoods throughout Barcelona also organized pickets, so that first thing in the morning you would get a group of maybe 50, maybe 100 people in the neighborhood to go walk around the streets and close down all the businesses that were scabbing on the strike, that were opening even though a general strike had been declared. And the pickets were also shutting down the major roads. There were burning tire barricades set up on all the major arterial roads coming into Barcelona in the morning, so that traffic was shut down. And this the fact that starting from early in the morning there were columns of smoke going up around the city, and there were fires in the neighborhoods, and the fact that there were large groups of people going around making a lot of noise and blockading streets and shutting down businesses that were trying to open made the strike a reality. And so then in the afternoon you had hundreds of thousands of people go out into the streets. At midday you had a very, very rowdy anarchist protest that walked down this bougie luxury street and smashed a whole lot of banks and luxury stores and set a whole bunch of fires. But then you just had the police totally lose control in the afternoon, when all of these other people, this kind of so-called apolitical people, came out into the streets and identified with this struggle, not with a very media-friendly, peaceful protest of citizens, but in an actual fight against the different forces that are making people's lives hell.
Thanks, Peter. And that about does it for this edition of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine. If you'd like to listen to my entire conversation with Peter Gelderloos, just visit my fucking website, stimulator.tv. As always, I owe an extra spicy splash of appreciation to all the peeps who keep converting their sweat into tacos to keep fueling this here show. Jason, Steven, James, Stanislav, Katie, Daniel, Adrian, Todd, Gavi, Miguel, Fernando, Thomas, Preston Productions, Max, Tom, Alexander, New Generation Sports Design, Chris, Gregory, Christine, Kyle, Alisa, Francois, Peter, Valentin, Jahi, Jennifer, Liam, John, Aaron, Robin, Garrick, Benjamin, Micah, Steven, Serena, Edward, Robert, Mark, Anthony, Rafael, Andrew, James, Pavel, Christopher, Reginald, Samantha, Carl, Eldon, Joel, Dennis, and Kirk. Nopalitos. I would also like to welcome the newest members of the Taconspiracy: Alexander, Alyssa, Katie, Steven, Samantha, and Jason, Tres Leches. To comment on this show or to send me stories about your community assembly, just visit my fucking website, stimulator.tv. Au revoir, motherfucker.
It's like the homie tried to borrow a couple bucks to get lunch, then says fuck that, takes the money, goes and buys him a gun, then robs a bunch of motherfuckers but don't give nothing up. Instead he pays out all his homies, turns around and hits you up for more money. Throw money to some Syrian rebels and fuck Bashar, but sure it's hard when America starts to meddle. Meanwhile in every hood we just mimicking that imperialist attack. That's why kids call it Chirac.